Welcome to Golf Industry Guru and the Gig Podcast, where we interview the best and brightest golf and hospitality leaders on the planet. On today's episode, you will learn some proven real-world solutions that'll help you and your team solve some of your biggest golf business challenges. So stick around for some tips, tools, and training to get you, your people, and your business powered on. Here's your host, James Cronk.
Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen of Gig Nation. It is James Cronk back with another Golf Industry Guru podcast. It is wonderful to have you listening no matter where you are in the world. But if you are in the golf business in any capacity, this guest today is going to share with you some very, very important messages that you need to hear. And in addition to all the unbelievable exciting things this guy does, the great message he's going to share is just on top of other wonderful things that this fellow does in the golf business. I'm excited to have as my guest today, Mr. Todd Keirstead, an entertainer, a trick shot artist, an activist in the golf industry, and a skin cancer survivor that you're going to learn more about. So welcome, Todd, to the Golf Industry Guru podcast.
James, thank you so much for having me.
And a return guest, because it was a few years ago that you were one of our very first guests of this podcast, and your story has changed since then, Todd. But before we get into that important message, let's just talk about your we were just offline. We're talking about this week in particular is the RBC Canadian Open, which is in Toronto, in Canada. And you were just sharing with me that you've got a very busy schedule. Tell our listeners, Todd, about all the things that you do in the golf industry.
Oh, James, the golf industry has given me so much. It's given me my passion, my love, my career. I've been a PGA professional for over 25 years. I've had the incredible privilege of playing for a little bit. Then old hockey injuries crept up, so I couldn't compete on a level that I wanted to make money. So I ended up getting into the world of golf instruction. And then from there, I found a very unique skill set of hand-eye coordination, where I've won now Trick Shot of the Year on the Golf Channel, been featured on everything from ESPN, Sports Illustrated, TSN, to even TMZ on 4 different occasions. And I always, want to say not in a scandalous fashion with me and Harvey. But with traveling around the world, helping raise millions of dollars for various charities through golf entertainment. Very, very fortunate to be able to do what I do, to help giving back. And it's an incredible way to see the world while putting a smile on a lot of people's faces.
Well, and I think what's also great about what you do, Todd, because I've seen your work, is that you're able to obviously do the entertainment part and the trick shot part, which people love and gets them all excited, and also intertwine and weave in stories about your charity work, about your other efforts, about the other important parts of even, for example, paralegal and disabilities in golf, which is another passion of yours, I know. So, like your events this weekend, for example, you'll be doing, I'd assume you'll be showing off your talents, right?
Yeah. So what I'm going to be doing, I'm going to be at, it's funny, the RBC is happening in Toronto here, the Canadian Open, and tomorrow I'm at an event at Angus Glen, which is the former home of the Canadian Open. Then I'm heading down to a special anniversary down in, just outside the Windsor area in a place called Kingsville, where they're having their 100th it's a pretty big milestone event down there. So I'm doing 2 1-hour performances for them, where I'm just kind of having fun and letting people have a good time. But my career path changed a little bit in 2014. I actually did this 1-hour demonstration for a veterans hospital outside of Tampa, Florida. And it became apparent that a lot of the shots that I was hitting for pure entertainment value were actually emulating the wounded veterans that were in attendance. So I was hitting golf balls blindfolded, part of the entertainment show. Well, when I pulled the blindfold off, I looked out. There were individuals that were affected by mustard gas in the Vietnam War and lost their sight. I was swinging with one arm, showing the correlation between golf and tennis. There were arm amputees. I was hitting golf balls off my knees. There were double leg amputees. I was hitting golf balls out of a Costco fold-out chair. There were individuals that were in a wheelchair situation. So with that audience, this was a show that I've literally traveled around the world doing, but with that one particular audience, it changed my mindset that it wasn't so much entertaining anymore. It was motivating and inspiring because I was showing these incredible individuals that suffered horrific physical and mental situations in the theater of war that, you know what, maybe you can't play the game of golf the way that you used to, but here's an adaptive way for either you can use the game of golf for your recovery or to get back out into the golf course in an adaptive way. So it was a pretty powerful day that kind of changed my career path a little bit and gave me something that was a little bit more passionate of mine in working with individuals that thought they've lost the game due to their physical or mental situations.
And that, I think, is kind of driven you to continue to really make that a priority, right? I mean, tell our listeners about Paragolf Canada.
So I was heavily involved. So there was really nobody doing it. You know, there was different associations that were doing golf tournaments, really like small tournaments, but there was no real, I wanted to bring people together. You know, there's strength in numbers, and instead of everybody working in silos, let's bring people together. So, I started Paragolf Canada. I was graciously sponsored by two incredible sponsors. Then from there, I was involved in the 2017 Invictus Games, which is where Prince Harry had an Olympic-style event with 17 countries that brought in almost 550 athletes from around the world to compete. And golf was introduced as a sport in 17 in Toronto, and they brought me in as one of the organizing committee for that. Then from there, I was heavily involved with something called the Warrior Games, which is the U.S. version of it that inspired Prince Harry for the Invictus Games. And then I've been blessed to travel around the world with the United States Air Force, 45 military bases around the world working with their wounded veterans. And most recently, as of 3 weeks ago, I was at Miramar Marine Base, which is where they filmed Top Gun. And then I was at a place called Paris Island in South Carolina, where they do the 13-week boot camp where they take, you know, really young kids and turn them into Marines. So it was two powerful performances that I was able to do. But giving back as well too, and it's pretty special.
You know, on my show previously, we've had conversations, and I've had conversations individually with my good buddy Dave Barton, right, from the United States, and the National Alliance for Accessible Golf as well, that is trying to do the things that Paragolf Canada as well is focused on. Do you see, Todd? Have you seen, I guess, over the last few years, some momentum, I guess, in getting golf accessible to everyone out there, I guess, would be the best way to describe it. Because one of the things we talk about, and I talked about with Dave, was that, you know, there's golf courses that can do tiny little things to make their facility more accessible, to make it more inviting, to make it easier for people with disabilities to enjoy the game, to play the game, to learn the game, to come in and practice. Are you seeing some success in the golf industry being more accessible, I guess, is just the what's about.
Yeah, well, the great thing about it, you know, Golf Canada's taken on a national adaptive open. You know, PGA of Canada has changed their playing ability test to welcome individuals of with disabilities, and they've changed their their standards to make it more friendly. The golf community, it's still making headway. There's still room for improvement, obviously, but the ball is rolling. Golf Town now has become on board as well too, and they sponsor me we're going to start rolling out some programmings across the country through Golf Town. So we're just trying to create exposure for individuals to normalize, you know, individuals that have varying degrees of adaptivity. You know, when you look at somebody that has a leg amputee or an arm amputee, or even in a wheelchair, you know, a young man named Ryan Stritsnitsky from the Humboldt Broncos. I worked with him. He was a bus crash survivor. And, you know, when they first walk onto the tee deck, obviously the three individuals are looking at that disability. But the second they hit a golf ball, they're like, oh, these guys are golfers. These women are golfers. And it's just changing the mindset really from I can't to I can.
We'll get back to our conversation in a moment. But first, are you ready to learn from the world's greatest golf and hospitality industry leaders? Train your team and grow your business with a membership to Golf Industry Guru. Join for about $3 per day and give your team access to over 250 hours of courses, podcasts, webinars, templates, articles, live Q&A calls, and more. Free content samples and registration details at golfindustryguru.com.
Well, and you must really, and as I said, you and I have talked a couple times, and I know your level of empathy and passion and compassion for those individuals. And so it must be very rewarding for you in that work that you do to see kind of the impact that golf can bring those individuals.
It's powerful when I say this, but it's so true. Golf has literally saved people's lives. Like, I've worked with individuals that have suffered some horrific physical and mental situations, some Canadian wounded veterans who have struggled mentally with PTSD, with some psychological issues. And, what better reprieve than a 150-yard or 150-acre golf course, and it's pure serenity. There's no triggers. There's no, other than the triggers that they put on themselves when they hit a bad shot, but there's no stressors out there on the golf course. And it's giving people a purpose again. And, a lot of people think they've lost the game due to whatever situation, whether it be a stroke, whether it be an MS, Parkinson's. And it's changing the mindset, saying golf doesn't have to be 18 holes. Last week, we filmed a short movie documentary where I had a leg amputee Canadian veteran, and I also had a 19-year-old individual with severe cerebral palsy. Now, the game of golf to the 19-year-old with severe cerebral palsy was trying to make a 5-foot putt. And that was his success. That was his measurement of success. But now he can go to the drive range with his mom. They can do something where they can go play mini golf. Golf doesn't have to be 18 holes, but it's now giving him a sense of accomplishment and purpose, plus the opportunity to, again, get outside and maybe use golf as a little bit of rehabilitation.
Are there some things, before we move to a different topic, Todd, are there some things that a golf course can do or resources that they can seek out? What advice would you give a facility that wants to ensure that they're doing all that they can to be accessible to everyone?
The big thing is it's the mindset of not only the golf course, but the golfer as well, too. And I tell every adaptive athlete that I'm working with, it's the only thing that a golf course cares about is pace of play and course conditions. You can be, a one-legged golfer, a one-armed golfer in a wheelchair. Yeah, the magnifying glass is going to be on you when you first get out there, but when you are keeping up to the pace of play, when you're keeping the course conditions the same and following the etiquette rules, they're not going to care. But it's also then exposing to the staff members that, when they see this person or this group tee off on the first hole, they're going to see disability, but then they'll see ability. And that's the big thing, taking that dis word out of it. And they're going to see golfers. And so it's working with both in creating some kind of accommodations. Because as I said, when they first get on the golf course, there's a magnifying glass on. They're going to be looking and they're going to be watching because of the unknown. But the more people that get out there, the more people that they're able to see playing the game of golf, the more it's going to be normalized.
Well, I know you join me in inviting, all our listeners to explore. I mean, I've read in the past, and I've been in conferences where I've heard statements made. In fact, even you, Todd, I think in a presentation you gave a few years ago, was talking about the untapped potential of the opportunity of the amount of golfers that could be available if we make sure that we're as accessible as possible. And so, I would invite every operator, every course owner to make sure that they've got an effort of some kind to ensure that they're accessible to everyone, and to make sure that they're inviting everyone, because that's not only good for the community, it's not only good for these individuals, it's also good for business.
It absolutely is. It absolutely is. And I look at it, it could be even as simple as, provide a couple of times after your last twilight time. because some of these golfers might only be able to play 1, 2, or 3 holes.
Right.
Well, at the end of your last twilight time, let them play. Give them the opportunity. Provide a discounted rate, or even let them play for free. It's not going to cost them anything, and the opportunity of food and beverage is going to be there because they're going to be and they're not going to be coming alone. That's the good thing, and obviously they're going to want to maybe grab something to eat or grab something to drink. So it's the F&B could benefit as well too.
100%.
Yeah.
Now, you and I haven't had an in-depth conversation since your journey that I believe kind of started in, maybe you tell us, in 2023. But Todd, what I have watched that I think is so profound and has been so valuable is the highlight that you have brought to your own personal journey and that you've shared with people publicly, whether it's through articles, through podcasts, through presentations, through social media, which is certainly something that I've been watching. And so maybe can you take our listeners back a little bit, Todd, to your current kind of crusade, which is so incredibly important to people in our industry.
Well, I grew up playing every sport imaginable under the sun. I grew up playing, baseball, hockey, soccer. My parents had me playing everything. And obviously playing golf, spending thousands of hours under the sun. Back in 2023, I got diagnosed with skin cancer. It was something that, I knew something was going on. There was it looked like a small blemish on my nose that, wouldn't heal. That was persistent. That was, it was evolving. Then I was, being a guy, it's nothing. It's whatever, it's nothing at all. Then I was down in Florida playing golf, and a very good friend of mine is former Major League Baseball player, Jesse Litch. He played for the Toronto Blue Jays. Now Jesse was born in St. Petersburg, ginger, red hair, pale. So he's always been under the sun. But he looked at my nose one day and said, "You need to go get that thing checked out." So I came back up to Canada, went to my dermatologist. No biopsy was needed. They looked at me and they said, "You have skin cancer." And, when you hear that word cancer, it no matter what kind of cancer it is, that C word, I think there's not a more powerful word in the English dictionary. When I got diagnosed, it kind of hit me like a hammer. Then from there, I went online and started researching, and was a good thing, but it was also a very bad thing. You can go down a dark hole when you get onto the internet. But I got diagnosed with skin cancer, and took me 9 surgeries to not only rid my face of cancer, but also to bring me back. And I always say I got a face for radio, but 9 surgeries to get me back to, thankfully, touch wood, cancer free right now, and pretty intrusive stuff that I'll get into in a second.
Managing safety and compliance at your golf facility doesn't have to be overwhelming. Introducing the Toolbox, an all-in-one health and safety solution built specifically for the golf industry. Streamline your safety processes, manage staff training, equipment safety, chemical usage, hazard identification, and incident reporting, all from one easy-to-use platform. Save time, ensure compliance, and empower your team to proactively create a safer workplace. Learn how the Toolbox can help your golf facility thrive at thetoolbox.tech.
Well, I will tell you that my 90-year-old father right now is got skin cancer and has a head that needs to get bandaged every 2 days because it can't heal. And so we've lived that for the last couple of years. And so, and did you decide right away, Todd, that you were going to kind of tell your story publicly? Because you really kind of shared your journey, your surgeries, your pictures, your thoughts, your concerns, and then you obviously started to learn about it, and once again to bring you where you are today. But did you decide kind of in the very beginning, or I guess what made you decide?
Well, when I found out what was going to happen, it was a pretty intrusive surgery. So I was going to have Mohs surgery to rid my nose of skin cancer. Then they told me I was going to have something called a paramedian forehead flap. Now, what ended up happening, and I'll tell you the details. It's a little bit gory, but I love the shock value because it creates that awareness. So they did 4 rounds of Mohs surgery to rid my nose of skin cancer, which left a huge void in my nose. They then took a template of the hole that was on my nose. They put it on the top of my forehead. They then cut from my left eyebrow all the way up to my forehead, back around that template to my right eyebrow. They literally peeled my forehead down, inverted it, and sewed it to my nose. Then what they had to do was they had to fill in that gaping hole there. So it felt like I was wearing a hat that was 5 sizes too small. And then for 2.5 months, 3 months, I literally had my nose and my forehead attached. So every time I put ointment on my nose, I'd feel it on the top of my forehead because all the nerve endings were attached. So I knew this was what was going to happen. Now, with working with so many individuals that have suffered some severe physical and mental situations, I had no idea. Your face is your brand. Your face is your identity. When you look down at a 6-month-old, they smile because they recognize your face. And I had no idea what I was going to look like. So I thought about it and I said, okay, either I can go into recluse for 3 months because I looked horrendous, or you know what, I can throw it out there and put it out there and share my feelings, share my journey, share my story, share my look. As a form of healing for me to go public with it, but B, more so, if I could help one person out, that meant the world to me. So I went completely public with it. I shared everything. I shared pictures. We did videos. And the response was overwhelming. I had in the first probably month, almost 50 golf pros reach out to me and they're like, you know what? Your story has really resonated with me. I'm either I've already booked a dermatologist appointment or I'm going to see one. And over half of them had skin cancer and they didn't know it. They knew something was going on, but them seeing the story, them seeing the pictures, them seeing it, and it was graphic. It wasn't pretty at all, but it provided them with the motivation to do something and to be proactive. And, I look at it, if it just helps one person, then I know everything was worth it. So now, as you said, I've been on podcasts, I've been on television, I've spoke at the PGA show in Orlando as a keynote speaker. I'm actually speaking with the LPGA in July. It's a topic in the golf industry that needs to be talked about. I look at it, it's nobody's responsibility to put sunscreen on me. There's no responsibility to put, make me wear protective clothing. But I think there needs to be that education piece there because it's affecting a lot of people.
So many questions. What are some of the signs that you mentioned those 50 golf pros? You mentioned they said, it motivated them to go see a dermatologist. What are the signs that should motivate someone to go see a dermatologist?
If you have a mole, if there's changes in your skin, you have to be vigilant about that. And early detection is the key. Unfortunately, I was ignorant towards the thing that I keep on hearing all the time is I know about skin cancer, but I know nothing about skin cancer. That's the big thing that I hear all the time. And it's just being aware of your skin. It's about doing checks. It's about seeing anything that's changing. It's getting your family members, your spouse to look, on your back where you can't see or wherever, and make it so you're being proactive. Because if you can catch it early enough, it's preventable. It really is. Like it's 99% preventable if you catch it in time. The unfortunate thing is, it's something that's prolonged. You take a look at your father. He spent years under the sun and it finally caught up to him. It's not something that's instantaneous. I probably sealed my own fate. Like to me, a sunburn or a suntan was a badge of honor to how good the weekend was when I was growing up. And I probably sealed my fate by the time I was 30, but then just the prolonged exposure of being outside. And it's not just the golf industry. I did a talk for a construction safety program where it was a national conference and it was about for construction workers and spending hours under the sun. I'm doing talks for tennis, for soccer. It's affecting everybody. And we all take the sun for granted because it's been normalized as healthy, glowing skin. But at the end of the day, a suntan is damage. It's damage to your skin. And there's a lot of, I've spent hundreds of hours doing research on skin cancer. I've put together talks. I've done educational pieces, and the stuff that I've learned, I had no clue, really no clue. And not a lot of people do unless they've been affected by themselves.
Well, and like you said, affected by yourselves. You don't have to go too far and around your family tree to find someone that's been affected by cancer. I lost a cousin to cancer many, many years ago. My dad obviously is challenged with that now. I agree with you. You and I are follically challenged, Todd. I think anyone could see Todd and I right now. We look like, there's a lot of jokes about that. But one of the things I love about being bald is that I can put sunscreen on very easily, on my entire head. But I will admit, I'm terrible when it comes to, I want to get that healthy glow. I want to get a little bit of sun. I'll put my hat on eventually.
Yep.
But I don't start off with the bucket cap, which is really what someone should be doing when you're out in the golf course. And like you said, you can seal your fate when you're young and not realize it because you spend 100 hours of summer out in the sun for 15 years. And then guess what? It's too late to go backwards. But you mentioned some of the research you've done, Todd, and some of the statistics and things like that. What are some of the, and look, this isn't a doom and gloom podcast, but it's an awareness podcast. And we definitely want people in our industry to be aware. What are some of the things that people in our industry should be aware of?
Well, the big things are, so studies indicate 7% of the general public will be diagnosed with skin cancer in their lifetime.
Wow.
27% of golfers will be diagnosed with skin cancer in their lifetime.
Jeez.
Now, when I say 27%, it really doesn't mean much. But when I say one person out of every foursome will be diagnosed with skin cancer, that's when a golfer's eyes light up. 27% doesn't mean anything, but when I say one person out of every foursome, if you think about it, there's 6 million the National Golf Course Owners Association says there's 6 million golfers in Canada. If you take that 27%, now you're looking at 1.62 million Canadian golfers will develop skin cancer in their lifetime. I know your podcast goes to the U.S. Well, the numbers are even higher. You look at 26.6 million golfers in the United States. Do that math again on 27%. You're looking at almost 7 million golfers will be diagnosed with skin cancer in their lifetime in the U.S. And I'm not doing this as a doom and gloom, but we need to create an awareness piece. We need to create that shock value piece. And as I keep on saying, it's nobody's responsibility to put sunscreen on me, but we need to educate this. We need to talk about this. We need to get our head out of the sand. This doesn't have to be a negative thing. We can turn this into a positive for the golf industry to say, hey, we want to protect our members. We want to make sure you're living life to the fullest. You're playing golf for as long as you can. And the golf industry has done an incredible job with protecting us with one of the biggest things that we're all fearful of since we started playing golf, and that's lightning and electricity. If you think about it, I've done the studies as well. Environment Canada says there's 2 million lightning strikes in Canada a year. And on average, there's 2 to 3 fatalities annually. So if you think about that, the odds of being struck by lightning on a golf course is basically 1 out of every 500,000 people. There's going to be 80,000 people that get skin cancer in Canada alone. Now, the golf industry, we've done an incredible, remarkable job. We've got weather monitoring apps. We've got rules in our rules of golf for weather conditions. We have horns. We have sirens. We have just everything. And it's such a small amount of golfers that'll be affected by lightning compared to skin cancer. We've got to also reverse that table and create awareness about,
Did you know there's an easier way to manage risk at your golf facility? eGolf Waiver makes collecting signed waivers quick and hassle-free. Digitally gather signatures from your members and guests, whether they're checking in at the golf shop or at the bag drop. Keep your club safe from legal exposure, frivolous claims, and rising insurance premiums. Plus, our Lightspeed POS integration will enhance your workflow even further. Visit egolfwaiver.com today and safeguard your club's future.
Well, and look, I can be critical, and you tell me, how many golf shops have you been in the last 5 years that's selling sunscreen on the counter?
It's getting more, but I find, I do events all over the world. I do events at public courses, private courses. Where I see it in private clubs, in the men's change room, men's locker room.
Oh yeah, 100%. Sure.
But then, you're only applying it once. And I was bad at that. I either applied sunscreen if I remembered or if it was convenient. And I only did it once a day. And you should be applying every 2 hours. So think about that. If you do it on the first hole and do it again at the turn on the 10th hole, you're now covered. You're good. I'm not saying you're good, but you're protecting yourself. It is getting a little bit better out there. There's a few more golf courses that are, the last thing I see at a Golf Town store when I check out is a sun care product line. Yeah. Golf courses are getting that, but again, I don't know. I always look at it. I'm so glad. It sounds morbid, but I'm so glad the surgeries were intrusive as they were, because when I tell my story, it resonates. It's a shock value, and that's what we need. We need to be aware of this. I'm not saying we need to be scared of it, but I now feel the warmth on my skin now. I used to love it. Now I'm like, oh, okay, let's maybe cover up a little bit. Maybe let's, every event that I do now in my contract, that has to have a pop-up canopy. I need to have a tent. I'm wearing the bucket hats. They're not comfortable. It's just because I've never worn them. I've got to keep sunscreen right by my toothpaste, because I don't remember. It's still not habit yet to put sunscreen on myself first thing in the morning. So there's got to be these little reminders to make it habit. And, when people see the face that I had and the face that I still have, because I'm pretty scarred up, or when they've been affected by, personally or with family members and loved ones, that's when they really take notice. And the people that have been affected by skin cancer, when you see them on the golf course, because they're wearing the sleeves. Yeah. They're wearing the buckets hats, and the baseball hat, it doesn't really cut it either. You see the guys that are taking their hats off on television after 18 holes, and they're, you take a look at Stuart Sink. He had that tan line, and that was the dreaded tan line that I was worried about. I never wore a hat because I didn't want to put my wife through me with a friggin' tan line like that. So, it's just the education piece, and it doesn't have to be a negative thing. It's a positive thing. Let's protect ourselves so we have a long career in the game of golf.
And look, if every club that's listening to this podcast make sure that they've got sunscreen for sale at the counter, and that twice a year they include in their newsletter to their members or to their regular customers a skin awareness message, and if they train their staff, and they should be giving sunscreen to their staff as part of their PPE, right? Just to make sure that it's right there. So that before a kid goes out in a mower or rakes bunkers for 6 hours, that the 19-year-old, someone needs to say to him or her, hey, have you got sunscreen on? And just like, have you got your helmet on? Have you got sunscreen on? Right. So we do, because look, I've been in this business long enough to know that those things are not happening in general on a regular daily basis. In some places they are. And some managers, some clubs, especially if they've been through an experience, or someone they know has been through an experience, that's like anything. Once we've had a car accident, we all drive safer. I mean, so that's the unfortunate part of being ignorant, like you said, about what actually is out there. What are some suggestions that you give your audiences? What's the key kind of final messages that you give your audiences, Todd, when you're talking to them about sun protection?
The big thing is just cover up. The crazy thing about it, skin cancer is the most common form of cancer worldwide. It's the most common form to all other cancers combined, but it's the most preventable. So think about that. It's the most preventable. So covering up, wearing sunscreen, just being aware. And everybody always asks me, what sunscreen do you wear? What's the best? And I always say, you know what? The best sunscreen is the one that you actually wear. Yeah, and that's really what it is. There's chemical sunscreen, there's mineral sunscreens. They both do different jobs, but they do the same. They're protecting you from UV. Golfers don't want to put it on their hands because they're worrying about gripping the golf club. I'm putting it on every day. I'm putting it on, in the washroom, washing my hands, then reapplying again after 9 holes, washing my hands again. Then I'll pull out the aerosol and spray with that because it's more convenient. But it's just being proactive. It's being proactive, and it's being proactive about your health. And that's basically what it is. And the great thing about it, the golf industry is now starting to change. I'm getting private clubs that are asking me to talk to their membership. And the biggest compliment that I have had is, you are humanizing skin cancer for us. You telling your story, you sharing your journey. And it was a difficult one because, as I said, the face is your brand. I'm out there, you're out there, and everybody sees your face. And when, I'm still scarred from, the top of my forehead to my eyebrows, and then more around my nose. And, I've just got to be proactive about taking care of myself. It's, making sure when I'm driving in a car, my arm's not out the window, making sure if I'm in an office space, making sure I'm not by the window because the glass is only protecting, UVB rays and not UVA rays. And we can go down a hole. Like I've done so much, altitude, if you're playing golf in the Canadian Rockies where you're at a higher elevation, you're getting more UV. If you're playing, we all know south of us, go closer to the equator, it's a different sun down there because it's a different degree hitting you. There's so many variable factors. And I've become aware of this all just because I want to educate people on the things that I wish I would have known.
Yeah, you bet. You bet. Well, Todd, a couple things. First of all, you're still a great looking man. I'll tell you that. So,
while the people can't see me on the podcast,
I will tell all our listeners that, Todd's still a great looking guy. And, it's wonderful that it's so valuable how you've shared your story. I've been watching it, listening to it, seeing it along the way. I'm so glad you can share that story with our listeners, and I know people will take it to heart. And then, I also hope that people will reach out to you to bring you to their club and to entertain their members, or to entertain their group, or to tell them the Sun story, whatever it might be. How can our listeners get in touch with you? What's the best way, Todd?
I have a website. It's toddkeirsteadgolf.com. Just go on that, or even if you just Google golf trick shot guy, it comes up because, as I said, I've traveled the world doing this. I've had the privilege of playing some incredible golf courses, seeing the world, meeting some incredible people that I still got to pinch myself and go, wow, this is my career. It's a pretty good gig I got, and I love what I do. I love bringing, a different element to the game of golf to people. I love, I just did an event yesterday because of the Canadian Open here. I did an event with a bunch of, social media influencers, and it was kind of cool because, they can all play, but they were like, wow, that was pretty impressive, some of the stuff that I was doing. So, it's fun. It's bringing joy. It's bringing the education piece, not only for the game of golf, because it's more of an instructional entertainment show when I put that on, but when clubs bring me in, I know they want to be proactive for their membership, because at the end of the day, the membership is what keeps the golf person going. So why not give them the tools to protect themselves? And that's how I look at it. So, yeah.
Last question, and maybe you don't want to share it because it's your secret sauce. But what's the one shot that gets the biggest wow moment? And what's the one trick that I know you've got stuff online that is famous, but do you have one that is the most memorable in your bag of tricks?
Oh my God. The most memorable, I love hitting the shots, but I feed off the reactions of the people. I've had Bo Jackson throwing golf balls at me, and I'm hitting them out of the air. I'm hitting balls with Joe Carter, the home run king for the Toronto Blue Jays, but it's more feeding off the energy of the people. When I'm feeling the group out, and I know what shot can hit, what I can't hit. Sometimes they get a little bit risque, but I feed off. I know the audience. I know the 4 people that are coming up, and I would never put anybody in a situation that they would feel uncomfortable. But, laying somebody down and making them a human golf tee is a lot of fun. It's feeding off their energy. The 3 other guys or people are just, ham and egging it and having a good time. And as I said, to me, it's just, when I'm doing an event, I want to make sure that everybody leaving is having a good time, whether it's a 1-hour show, everybody has a great time, or when I'm doing a golf tournament or a charity event, I look at it, I'm putting on 36 8-minute shows a day, right? Well, here's 36 groups, 8-minute shows. And I want to make sure every one of that 36 groups are having a great time. So, you know what? It's not really, the shot's fun for me, but to me, it's more the energy of the people and feeding off that.
Well, I think about 25, 30 years ago, I laid down on a tee deck and someone hit a shot out of my mouth, and it was the scariest moment of my life. I still get the heebie-jeebies when I think about it right now. So, Todd, great having you on the show. Gig Nation, I invite you to check out his website. I invite you to check out Todd's work, his writings, his social media. Bring him to your club. But have a great week this week, Todd. I know you're going to be a busy guy. I know you're always a busy guy. And I know that we'll cross paths one of these days somewhere in the world again. And really appreciate you joining our Golf Industry Group podcast today.
No, you know what? To have me on Gig here, it's important. You guys are trailblazers as well as having me on to talk about this, because it's a topic that the industry doesn't really want to talk about yet. They're not open to it yet because they think there's a negative impact on it. And the only negative impact on it is not talking about it and not protecting the members. So you guys, I appreciate it 1,000% of me sharing my story. And hopefully, as I said, if it helps one person out, I always say, learn from my pain and learn from my scars.
Well, I know it will help out at least one, if not many, many more, Todd, including me. I'm gonna take your words of advice, and before I get in my car today, put some more sunscreen on. So great having you, Gig Nation. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you again, and as always, we will see you on the inside.
Thanks for listening to the Gig Podcast. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and mostly that you learned a few things that will help you improve your business. Join us next time as we continue to bring you the best and brightest golf and hospitality leaders on the planet. Thanks for listening.